The general did not stop walking when he saw the school janitor in the elementary school gymnasium. He stopped walking when he saw the scar on the man's forearm. It was a Thursday morning in late September. The Career Day assembly at Pinebrook Elementary School in eastern North Carolina had been running for 40 minutes. The visiting speaker was a Marine 3-star, recently retired, who had agreed to come at the invitation of the school's principal because the principal's late husband had been one of his junior officers in 2003, and the principal had finally this year found the courage to ask. The general was 68. He had a clean Class A uniform and a row of campaign ribbons that the third graders in the front row of the bleachers did not know how to count, and a small spiral notebook in his left breast pocket that he had been carrying for 41 years. He was halfway across the gymnasium floor on his way to the lectern when he saw the janitor. The janitor was leaning a wide gray broom against the doorframe by the cafeteria entrance. He was wearing the navy coveralls of the Pinebrook Elementary Maintenance Department with the school's pine tree logo on the chest pocket. He had a folded paper napkin in his other breast pocket. He had short gray hair and the steady level eyes of a man who had stopped being surprised by other men in a very long time. He had a clipped silver wedding band on his right hand that he had moved from his left hand 4 years earlier. He had the sleeves of his coveralls pushed up to his elbows because the gymnasium furnace had not been turned down for the assembly, and he had been about to drag the lunch carts in before the principal finished her welcome. On the outside of his right forearm near the wrist was a long, careful healed scar that ran in a diagonal pattern across 3 muscles and ended at the joint. The scar was not the kind of scar a man gets from a kitchen knife. It was not the kind of scar a man gets from a fall. It was the kind of scar a man gets when a piece of steel from a vehicle goes through his arm at a particular angle, in a particular direction, and a particular kind of medical corpsman wraps it under a particular kind of pressure for 44 minutes in the back of a moving Humvee. The general had seen that scar exactly once before. He had been there. The narration steps closer now. It rides Principal Linda Ojo. Linda Ojo, 57, was finishing her welcome remarks at the lectern when she felt more than saw the general stop behind her. She had spent the entirety of her 31 years in education learning how to feel a room. The room had gone in the space of 2 seconds from polite attentive to something else. She turned. The general was standing 6 feet from the lectern. His Class A jacket was still buttoned. His campaign ribbons were still in their row. His left hand was at his side. His right hand was very lightly raised, palm down, the way a man's hand lifts when he sees something he is not sure he is seeing. He was looking past her, across the gymnasium floor, at the doorframe by the cafeteria entrance. Linda Ojo, in her 31 years, had never seen a 3-star general's face do what this general's face was doing now. She followed his eyes. She saw Russell. Russell Hannigan was the janitor of Pinebrook Elementary. He was 46. He had been on the maintenance staff for 2 years and 3 months. He had taken the job in the second autumn after his wife died of a sudden heart attack at 38 in their own kitchen on a Tuesday in October, 8 days before their daughter Aiden's 7th birthday, after he had spent 4 months at a stretch on his last assignment in the Pacific Theater, and had come home to bury his wife, and to find a job that would let him be home by 3:30 in the afternoon for his only child for the rest of his life. He had not told anyone at Pinebrook Elementary what he had done before the maintenance job. He had told nobody at all. He had taken the coveralls from the assistant principal on his first morning in August 2 years ago, and pushed up the sleeves only when the heat in the building required him to, which was less than once a week. He had told the principal, when she had asked him at his interview what his prior work had been, that he had been a logistics technician for the federal government. She had not asked any further. She had hired him because the cafeteria manager had walked into her office that morning and said the new man was the only candidate of 9 who had looked her in the eye and called her ma'am. He had been pushing up his sleeves this Thursday morning because the furnace was too hot. He saw the general turn. He saw the general's face. He set the broom against the doorframe. He stood at the doorframe with his hands at his sides. He did not leave the room. The narration sees what happens. The general did not move toward the lectern. He did not glance at the row of 3rd graders in the front row of the bleachers. He did not look at the principal. He took 2 careful steps across the gymnasium floor toward the doorframe by the cafeteria entrance and he stopped 6 feet short of Russell Hannigan, and he stood at attention. He said in a voice that carried across the gymnasium, because the gymnasium had gone completely silent, "Hannigan." Russell said, "General." The general said, "Sergeant Major Russell Carter Hannigan, United States Marine Corps, 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, Echo Company, call sign Saint Anchor." Russell said, "Level, yes, sir." The general said, "Sergeant Major, I have been looking for you for 7 years." Russell said, "Sir, I know." The narration steps to Principal Linda Ojo at the lectern, who has, in her 31 years in education, never been part of a moment like this one and will not be again, and who has the presence of mind in the 7 seconds that follow to step quietly down off the lectern and to take her seat in the front row of the bleachers and to leave the floor to the 2 men. The general crossed the remaining 6 feet. He stopped 2 feet from Russell Hannigan. He saluted him with a Marine's 3-fingered precise drop. Russell returned the salute. The general lowered his hand. He took a half step forward and put his right hand on Russell Hannigan's left shoulder. He said very quietly, so that only Russell and the first row of bleachers could hear him, "Son, I had been looking for you to give you something. The fact that I found you in a school gymnasium with a broom in your hand is the kindest thing the Marine Corps has done for me in 8 years." Russell said, "Sir, I am very glad to see you." The general said, "And I you." The narration steps to the bleachers now. It rides the 3rd graders. The 3rd graders did not yet understand what they were watching. They knew that the man in the dark uniform with the row of colored ribbons had walked across the floor of their gymnasium and shaken hands, very seriously, with Mr. Hannigan from the cafeteria entrance. They knew that Mr. Hannigan was the one who fixed the drinking fountain when it leaked, and who put new light bulbs in the hallway every other Wednesday, and who came down off the stage at the end of every assembly to push the lunch carts in by himself because Mr. Carver, the assistant janitor, had a bad back. One of the 3rd graders in the front row was Aiden Hannigan. She was 9. She was wearing a blue and white striped dress that she had picked out herself. She was sitting in the 2nd seat from the end. She did not move. The general turned to face the room. He lifted his voice for 240 children and 48 teachers and parents, and the principal. He said, "I want to tell you a story. I had prepared a different one. I will tell you this one instead, if your school will give me permission." Linda Ojo from the front row of the bleachers said, "Yes, sir, please." The general told them the story. He told them in language a 3rd grader could follow that 21 years earlier, when he had been a colonel commanding a Marine Reconnaissance Battalion in a part of the world where the dust got into your boots, his lead vehicle had been hit by a roadside device on a road outside a village whose name he would not pronounce in their gymnasium, because the children did not need to carry the name. He told them his driver had been killed. He told them the gunner had been wounded. He told them the man in the lead vehicle with him, the platoon sergeant of the team that walked in front of the colonel's truck, had run 40 meters in the open, dragged the gunner out of the wreck, and held a piece of his own forearm against the gunner's femoral artery for 44 minutes in the back of a moving Humvee until the medevac took the gunner away. He told them the gunner had lived. He told them that the platoon sergeant had finished his deployment and had been recommended for the Navy Cross, and had refused the recommendation in writing on a folded paper napkin that he had pulled out of his own breast pocket on the day of the ceremony, because he did not want his wife in Pinebrook, North Carolina, to find out from a newspaper that her husband had bled into a Humvee on a road outside a village while she had been at home in the kitchen folding diapers. He told them the platoon sergeant's wife had passed away 4 years ago. He told them the platoon sergeant was the man with the broom by the cafeteria entrance. He told them the gunner had a name. He said the gunner's name. A man in the back of the bleachers stood up. The narration, through Linda Ojo at the front, sees who he is. He is in his late 50s. He has a clean Marine Corps polo shirt and a pair of canvas trousers and a steel cane. He has been sitting in the bleachers since the start of the assembly. He had driven up from Camp Lejeune at 5 in the morning because his commanding general had called him on a Sunday and told him he had received an unverified tip that the man who had carried him out of the Humvee was alive and working at an elementary school in eastern North Carolina, and that the general would be making a school visit on a Thursday, and that the gunner was invited. The gunner walked down the bleacher stairs. The general stepped aside. The gunner stopped 2 feet from Russell Hannigan, and he did not salute, because the gunner was no longer in uniform, and because the kind of thanks that one man owes another for 44 minutes in the back of a Humvee cannot be paid by a salute. He set his cane against the doorframe. He embraced Russell Hannigan. Russell embraced him back. The two men stood in the doorframe of the gymnasium for a long moment. The general gave them the time they needed. The principal gave them the time they needed. The third graders gave them the time they needed because the third graders in the front row of the bleachers understood now, by some quiet decoding their teachers had not had to explain what had happened in this room. Aiden Hannigan stood up. She walked across the gymnasium floor toward her father. She did not run. She walked the last 6 feet level and steady, the way her father had taught her to walk into a room she had been waiting to walk into, and she stopped at his side, and she took his right hand in both of hers, the hand with the scar, and she held it. She said, "Dad." He said, "Aiden." She said, "Is this man the gunner?" He said, "Yes, sweetheart." She said, "Then I'm glad he came." The narration steps a year forward. A year later, the Marine Corps League posted, in the corner of the Pinebrook Elementary cafeteria, a small framed copy of the citation that Russell Hannigan had refused to accept 22 years earlier. The frame is plain. The glass is clean. The citation reads at the bottom the words the general had spoken on that Thursday morning in September, St. Anchor. It does not list rank, it does not list date, it does not list theater, it lists in the same plain font the only line the gunner had asked for the man who held my arm. The cafeteria line lunch ladies dust the frame on Wednesdays. The third graders, who are now fourth graders, pass it on their way to their lunch trays. They do not ask any longer who Mr. Hannigan was before he came to push the broom. They know. Russell Hannigan still works at Pinebrook Elementary. He still leaves the building at 3:30 every afternoon to walk his daughter home. He still folds the paper napkin into his breast pocket every morning, because his daughter drew a small heart on a corner of it the day she turned 8 and asked him, gentle, never to throw it away. He keeps it there. He has not, in the year since the assembly, told anyone else what is in his pocket. The general visits twice a year. The gunner comes with him. They eat in the cafeteria line. They pay for their own lunch trays. The cafeteria manager who first hired Russell refuses every year to take their money and is overruled every year by the general, who says level that Marines pay for their own lunch. The lunch ladies have started saving their receipts. They put the receipts in an envelope in the principal's office that says, in Linda Ojo's careful schoolteacher hand, for St. Anchor's troop, do not open. The third grade class at Pinebrook Elementary did career day differently this year. They moved it from the gymnasium to the cafeteria, because the cafeteria, the principal had decided, was the room in their building where the most important career was practiced. They did not put up a sign. They did not need to. The witness narration closes on Aiden Hannigan, 10 now, who walks home with her father on a Thursday afternoon in late September, and who says, on the corner of Pinebrook Avenue and Holly Street, the line that the witness narration has been waiting for her to say all year. She says, "Dad, I'm glad you held his arm." He says, "Sweetheart, so am I." He says, "So is your mom." He walks her the rest of the way home in the late September light, with the folded napkin in his breast pocket and the long, careful scar on the outside of his right forearm catching the slow gold afternoon sun. And the witness narration ends, as the niche knows to end, on the steady plain decency of a man who never needed the medal to know what he had done, and who finally let his daughter know it, because a general had walked across a gymnasium floor on a Thursday morning and called his name in front of the room. St. Anchor. It was the only name he had ever needed.